I thought we had agreed that we weren't going to talk about our long hot shower together. I thought you and I had sort of made a deal, like, hey, this is just us. This is just us, and I'm upset that you've now revealed my showering habits to everyone. Yeah. That was just with you.
Yeah, we were just going to keep that one night in Buffalo on the road to ourselves. That's all right. Yeah. Everyone can know about that. That's fun.
Fantasy Football Happy Hour with Matthew Berry, served by Applebee's.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Happy Hour. I'm Connor Rogers alongside Matthew Berry. Jay Croucher, I guess, mortified after the shower reveal.
He's probably showering with somebody else. I'm jealous. I'm a little jelly.
Or J5 promo code didn't sell enough magazines.
Apparently not. I think the promo code is J10.
Jay made it to 10. I made it to 5.
Yeah, it's Berry 20. If you want the NBC Sports, if you want this bad boy, go to NBCSports.com/draft guide. Use promo code Berry20 for 20% off. Or if you only want 10% off, J10. And if you want 5% off, Connor 5. Those are the promo codes that will get you 5, 10, or 20% off. It just depends on how much you want to pay. Yeah. It's worth it, by the way. It's still a great deal at Connor 5.
Great content.
Yeah, 1,000%.
The bougie, wealthy customers use
and it's
Connor
updated
5.
online. It's updated online all the time, so it's not like you have to worry about just the magazine going out of date, everything like that. Anyway, I will always remember, Jay Croucher, our one night in Buffalo, even if you do not.
Have no fear. Jay will be back when we are back on Wednesday.
Maybe he'll
we'll
be
see.
back.
It's
we'll
up to him. Let's get into the Rotoworld headlines. We have a lot to get through today, Barry. And it starts with Alvin Kamara. Officially, he will be suspended per Adam Schefter. He'll be suspended 3 games for his role in a fight outside a Las Vegas nightclub in 2022. Jeremy Fowler reports that free agent Kareem Hunt is expected to meet with the Saints now. So Kamara, honestly, this isn't not only not a surprise, but a number of games that I think isn't overwhelming for Kamara with only 3.
No, I mean, what we said on Friday's show, and we did that in the morning, so before the news broke, but we said, we think it'll be a couple of games. 3
couple games
is a couple of games, right? And so, and they've had, a couple of depth issues there in the Saints backfield as well. Yeah, so they're kicking the tires on Kareem Hunt. Let's start there. Let's start with Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt wasn't good
Not at all.
last year. Kareem Hunt is a big name. By the way, a former fantasy ride or die. Kareem Hunt's rookie year, one of my best calls. But last year, averaging under 4 yards per carry and yards per touch, career lows in both last season. Career low in receiving yards per game. All his underlying metrics were bad. And then you look at just sort of the game film and the numbers are he couldn't get on the field. They didn't use him very much. Usually he used to be good for Chubb will get 20, 18 to 20 touches a game, and Hunt will get 8 to 12, and it was more 3 or 4. Kareem Hunt might be done. I don't know what happened to him last year in Cleveland, but he hasn't gotten nearly, it feels like, the amount of attention or camp visits that Dalvin Cook or Leonard Fournette or Ezekiel Elliott, the other big-name running backs that are out there. So we'll see what happens here. This feels more about depth. They are going to be without Kamara for 3 games. But, I've Kareem Hunt ranked as running back 60. So, you know what I mean? He's going as running back 58, by the way, on over there in Yahoo. So I want to talk about Kamara, though, now. And it's sort of I'm out on Kamara this year. Now, I'm at running back 32. His ADP is running back 26, so I'm lower than the consensus on him. I don't hate that. If you want to take him as your running back 3 as a mid-tier running back, in that running back 25 to 30 range, fine. But, what you're hoping for is that we see the guy, not from last year, but from a couple of years ago. We've talked about this, but last year, on a points per game basis, from week 9 on, he was running back 36. In the last 2 seasons, he's had 6 rushing touchdowns on 463 carries. And those 6 touchdowns came in 2 games. They used Taysom Hill in a bunch of ways. Now they've got Kendre Miller and Jamal Williams, who was a touchdown machine last year. I just don't know that you can feel great about the scoring equity of Alvin Kamara this year. He missed 6 games over the past 2 seasons. He has been injury prone. It's a new offense when you think about the fact that Derek Carr is there. Maybe Derek Carr dumps off a little bit more, but I don't know. Like, to me, Derek Carr has got a big arm, likes to throw it deep. And, oh, by the way, there's Chris Olave. And they added Jimmy Graham as a red zone threat, whatever.
They have a million tight ends.
Juwan Johnson, right, is there. Week 8 of last year, he had a 42-point game. Great, awesome, amazing. He had one huge game. But you take that game out, and he averaged 12.1 fantasy points per game last year, which would have been running back 24. So you're looking at a guy who last year was more or less running back 24. He was a flex play. He was a flex play most weeks. And oh, by the way, we know he's definitely missing 3 games, and he might miss more because he's missed 6 over the last 2 games. He's been injury prone. Alvin Kamara, for me, this year is a guy you wind up with, not a guy you target. You find yourself in the middle of your draft and you're like, you need a running back and you're good everywhere else and you're just sort of like, okay, fine. Maybe he regains the magic. You know what I mean? But like, he's not anyone I'm targeting, and there are players in his range that I like better, that I think have more upside than Alvin Kamara. I think he's a bigger name than production at this point of his career. I'll just tell you, I think Jamal Williams is a really good running back. Obviously, he got a bunch of bunny touchdowns last year. But here's my last thing, too, Connor, and you can speak to this. I think Kendre Miller's really good.
That's the big elephant in the room, right? The Saints kind of showing their hand that they're getting ready to move on. There's a 3rd-round pick on Kendre Miller. It's like he was a 5th or 6th or 7th-round flyer, UDFA, a 3rd-round pick after signing Jamal Williams. And now they're bringing in Kareem Hunt for a visit. The Saints are just showing their hand over and over again that the Kamara days, the heyday of Kamara, is starting to look like it's in the rearview mirror.
And what are again, Connor, you do such great work with the draft work, for so many years at Bleacher Report, now with us at NBC Sports. What are the Saints getting in Kendre Miller?
A guy that could be a workhorse in between the tackles. He's got enough juice to get outside. They know Jamal Williams can do that for them in the red zone, and they know Jamal Williams is great in pass protection. So I think Kendre Miller can steal those 1st and 2nd down kind of carries, while Jamal Williams can be a 3rd down back because of his blocking, a goal line back because of how good he is in the red zone. And when you factor that in, you start to wonder how much workload is there for Kamara. Of course, Kamara's not completely taken out of the offense, but is he 1/3 of the running back committee?
Right. And again, we could see Kendre Miller once he gets in there and he learns on the pass pro and everything like that, like second half of the season. Here's the other thing that I think is interesting. So I interviewed Kendre Miller at the NFLPA Rookie Premiere. And, I interviewed 40 players in one day. And they give you these like little facts, these little, factoids, things to talk to the players about. And one of the things it says on my sheet, right, is like Kendre Miller's favorite player growing up was Jerry Rice. So that's like literally one of the first things I ask him, like, wait, you're a running back, dude. Why is Jerry Rice, who, by the way, his heyday was before, when you were a kid, Jerry Rice was already retired, right? I mean, Kendre Miller's like 22 years old or whatever it is. I'm like, Jerry Rice. And he goes, growing up, I always wanted to be a receiver.
Of course.
And Jerry Rice is the greatest receiver of all time. So he's like, I will watch clips on YouTube and whatever. And so, like, I don't think people appreciate, and we talked about this. He's like, I can catch the ball. I take great pride in my hands and my skills. He's like, I did a drill where I was catching tennis balls in Saints camp, and they were blown away. He's like, they just, at TCU, they just never needed him to be in the passing game. But he's like, I can catch the ball. I grew up wanting to be a wide receiver. I thought I was going to be a wide receiver, And so I just think that's a very underrated, underreported aspect of Kendre Miller's game.
Yeah, they could tap into that ceiling. We have this conversation on running backs every year. It was Kenneth Walker at Michigan State. Everyone was like, he didn't catch any passes. It's not that he can't catch the ball. It's that he wasn't used that way in college. In TCU, the way their offense was constructed, Kendre Miller was a workhorse runner. He didn't need to be this dynamic receiving threat.
Because passing-wise, they were very vertical.
Yes, they had Quentin Johnson. Max Dugan, their quarterback, can run as well.
Right.
So he ate into a lot of some of the workload there. So Kendre Miller, super high ceiling, and I think the Saints are eager to find out what he looks like as soon as they can. And that goes back to Alvin Kamara.
Yes.
Who, as you said.
Again, I'm lower on him. I'm at running back 32, lower than consensus. I probably won't have very many, if any, shares of Alvin Kamara this year.
More running back news. Our very own Mike Florio reports the Chiefs and the Broncos are among the teams interested in Raiders running back Josh Jacobs, who obviously has not been practicing at camp yet. He's not interested in playing on the franchise tag, as we've seen. But 2 teams in their division, Barry, interested. I don't know if it's poking the bear or It's just very interesting that Jacobs would be on their radar.
It's a weird one. This is a weird one. Now, listen, I will tell you this. I know Mike Florio pretty well. He legit has sources. Like I sit next to him, in the football night meetings and everything like that. His phone is constantly going off. But this one's a weird one to me. A, because I don't think there's any chance the Raiders, if they do trade him, would trade him within the division.
It'd be insane.
And especially to the Super Bowl champion Chiefs. The other thing is that it doesn't feel like a need for either of those teams. Like if you told me the Colts were interested in Josh Jacobs, okay, my problem for yours, like that sort of makes sense, right? But it feels like for the Chiefs, who got such great production from Isaiah Pacheco and Jerick McKinnon, they still have Clyde Edwards-Helaire on the roster as well. It just feels like, because Jacobs is really good, but I don't know, the Chiefs won the Super Bowl with a group that they had, and then you think over to Denver, and I guess unless the camp reports about Javonte Williams being, but they signed Samaje Perine to a real contract as well. They have some other guys there too. It doesn't feel like it's those two teams are like, if I said to you, hey, there's two teams in the NFL that really are interested in Josh Jacobs, those are not the first two that come to mind.
I think
that need a running back.
Yeah, what jumps out to me is that teams are now in the sniffing around phase of Josh Jacobs, because it's a wonder of, obviously the Raiders is a great fantasy spot for him to play, but if that relationship officially comes to an end at some point, it's a matter of what are the landing spots that make Josh Jacobs, as maybe saying as good as last year where he led the league in rushing is unfair, but the same caliber of player in fantasy, I think, is what would be interesting in a trade.
9 different games with at least 19 fantasy points last year. No running back in the NFL had more games of 19 or more fantasy points as well. 6 different games with 150 total yards, twice as many as any other running back. Stat after stat after stat. Pick a stat. Josh Jacobs was awesome last year. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little nervous. Again, we've talked about this on this show. If there was a guy that you were who had the wherewithal, the internal fortitude.
Nice pivot.
The internal fortitude to not report, to say I'll take the fine, I'll forego money. I'm making a point about not only my pay but the pay for other running backs. I think it's Josh Jacobs. As he has faced tougher adversity in his life than this, and so we'll see. You have to hope they come to their senses and that there's some sort of Austin Eckler / Saquon Barkley type deal where they give him a little bit more money for the 1 year, let him save face. Okay, he's there, he's back, and at the end of the year, either they separate or they work out a long-term solution.
I think he's a guy that, unlike Saquon Barkley, needs to negotiate that, hey, I'll play here this year on the tag. Maybe I get another $1 million in incentives, but I'm only signing this if you write in that you can't tag me again next year. I was surprised Barkley didn't get that written in his deal, and maybe that's what Jacobs, that's the compromise, that he can't be tagged twice.
Yeah, but I wonder, though, I think it's two things. Again, you sort of know what each leverage. But I will just say that I think if you are Saquon Barkley, who is a very famous player, highly marketable, on a playoff team with a great coach and living in, the biggest media market in the world, right? If you're Saquon, there's a lot of value beyond just the actual money of being the star running back of the New York Giants, especially this year. Again, playoff team, and if you're a star in New York, you can make a lot of money doing a lot of other things. Whereas being the star running back of the Las Vegas Raiders, a team that we expect to struggle this year, that's actually going to be in contention for the number 1 pick, unless things get crazy. There's a different set of considerations for Josh Jacobs than I think there are there for Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, I think that's fair. As the Jonathan Taylor situation continues on in Indianapolis, the Colts signed Kenyan Drake. Obviously, Drake last played with the Ravens. I feel like we always end up somehow back in the Kenyan Drake conversation. Yeah,
are you shocked, by the way, that Kenyan Drake found a gig before Dalvin Cook or Ezekiel
Didn't have that
Elliott?
On the bingo card.
Right, Leonard Fournette.
Right.
And I tweeted that out, and people were like, yeah, well, he's playing for the minimum. And those guys want a lot of money. I said, I get it, but yeah, Kenyan Drake's been playing for the minimum for a couple years now.
Time. It's not news. Yeah.
I'm still saying I don't care. Kenyan Drake at the minimum versus Dalvin Cook at whatever he's demanding. I still think Dalvin Cook would have gotten a gig before Kenyan Drake, but that's the world we live in. I don't think there's any fantasy relevance here. If Taylor holds out, if something happens, then yes, sure. But this to me felt like they also lost Zach Moss. Zach Moss got injured. He's going to be out a significant amount of time. So I think this was more about depth in the running back room and more about the Zach Moss injury than I think it was any kind of shot across the bow to Jonathan Taylor. Like if I'm Jonathan Taylor, I'm like,
not sweating this.
Yeah, you're totally. I'm like,
I got to come
good.
back. Kenyan Drake's here.
Yeah, exactly. Oh no. Oh, what am I going to do? Kenyan Drake. All due respect to Kenyan Drake, he's not the same kind of player as Jonathan Taylor. He's fine. But, again, I'd rather draft Deion Jackson than Kenyan Drake at this point. I like Deion Jackson, by the way. He played well last year when he got a shot.
Fill-in.
Yeah, and then they ended up doing the Hines Zach Moss deal mid-season. But I thought Deion Jackson, when he got a shot on a bad team in Indianapolis, actually played well.
ESPN's Eric Woodard reports the Lions expect a two-headed monster at running back with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. Barry, everything out of Detroit's camp seems like Montgomery is going to get a sizable amount of touches running downhill, and we know how much the Lions love Gibbs as a pass catcher.
They really do. We've seen all the video. They're excited that they got him at running back. They got him at 12 overall. To pick a running back. Right. And they were thrilled. So I think Gibbs is going to be a huge part of their offense. I love Gibbs. I will tell you this. Gibbs was on the short list for my fantasy ride or die. Obviously, I ultimately went with his teammate, Amon-Ra St. Brown, but Jahmyr Gibbs was on my short list of somebody that so if I was going to do it positionally, he'd be my running back ride or die. Having said that, I will tell you, when I was out at Football Night in America, we did the preseason game at the Hall of Fame. I was talking with Jason Garrett. Now, Jason Garrett was in Detroit. I think you saw a clip of it. If you watch Football Night in America, you saw a clip of Jason talk with Dan Campbell. They had an interview. You'll see more of that. Obviously, we opened the season in Kansas City, Lions versus the Chiefs. That is the first game of the year right here on NBC and Peacock. I'm a company man. But my point of telling you all this is that Jason Garrett went to Lions camp as part of our, as part of what we're doing to broadcast the Lions-Chiefs game in the opening game of the season. And he told me, we're just talking, he goes, they love David Montgomery there. They love him. They think he's a true power runner. They can do what they like. So again, if the easy kind of lazy comparison is, Gibbs is going to be DeAndre Swift, David Montgomery is going to be Jamal Williams. And I think that's kind of lazy and easy, and I think it's more nuanced than that. I think they'll use Gibbs more, and they'll be more creative with Gibbs in a way that they weren't with Swift. They kind of had to keep Swift in bubble wrap. But I also think it's not 100% inaccurate either. I do think David Montgomery's getting 200 touches, and I think he's going to get some high-value ones as well. I do think I have Gibbs higher than Montgomery because of the passing game usage, because I think he's just a more dynamic player. I think he's a better NFL player at this point. We haven't seen him on the field, but I think he's just a better football player than David Montgomery. But make no mistake, David Montgomery's going to have a good year. He's going to have a very good fantasy year.
Potent offense. Smart offensive coordinator. They can throw the ball so well between the 20s, they get the opportunity to run inside the red.
And by the way, sneakily, one of the best offensive lines in football.
Absolutely.
They can block. And so Dave Montgomery's a guy who never gets hurt. 12 of the, last year, a little bit banged up, but literally, of his 15 healthy games last year, he got over 15 touches in 12 of them. Again, for a terrible Browns season. All 4 years, Bears. How many Bees team can I name? All right, sorry. English is my second language. Look, the fact of the matter is that for the Chicago Bears, over 1,000 yards from scrimmage, over 230 touches, all 4 seasons that Montgomery has played in Chicago. You sign him to be a workhorse,
right?
And that's what he's going to be. I think they'll sprinkle in Gibbs. Again, I prefer Gibbs to Montgomery, but I don't mind having both those guys on my team.
And the Lions finally feel like a team that should be playing with some leads.
Yes.
Turn around. Hand the ball to David Montgomery. Have him help you close out games. Over in Tampa Bay, staying with running back news, Jenna Lane from ESPN expects Chase Edmonds to open the season as the Bucs' third down back. Barry, we've talked on this show about Rachaad White. Can he be a star? Can he be the guy? But Chase Edmonds obviously carving out a role with the Bucs.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
We'll see.
Sure. Maybe. Here's what's weird to me. Here's what's weird to me on Chase Edmonds. He was good for a minute. He was good in Arizona. But then it didn't work out in Miami, and it didn't work out in Denver. Now, Denver was, the whole season last year was lost. But okay. So he's on his 4th team in what, a year and a half? Something like that? Is it 2 years? Like, he's a tweener. Like, like he's going to be the third down back. Well, what else is he going to do?
Right.
What else? Obviously. What else is he going to do? Like, he's the third down back or he's going to be bench, I suppose. But okay. I didn't rank him.
Yeah.
Knock yourself out with Chase Edmonds. Slow news day. Do what you want.
Right.
I think there is here's what I'll say. I'll give you a take on Chase Edmonds. You want to take out? I'm trying to think. I'm sitting here trying to think of a freaking take on Chase Edmonds. Here's a take on Chase Edmonds. Here's a Chase. I believe there is a better chance. I'm willing to go on this. I believe there is a better chance. I'm sitting here, camera one. I believe there is a better chance that Rachaad White develops a significant third down role than Chase Edmonds being fantasy relevant this year. Like if Rachaad White, I'm not wishing this at all, but if we suddenly found out like next week Rachaad White was going down had some sort of injury or was going to miss a significant amount of time this year, like, yeah, I think they would hustle out and sign one of those free agent veterans and Keyshawn Vaughn. By the way, I'll say this. I say Keyshawn Vaughn has more fantasy value this year at the end of the year than Chase Edmonds. I don't even like Keyshawn Vaughn. You know who else doesn't like Keyshawn Vaughn? The Buccaneers.
Yeah, they clearly don't. They haven't.
No.
For quite some time.
I just been there, done that with Chase Edmonds. For whatever reason, like he had a kind of a moment with Arizona, and that's it. It sort of feels like it's not going to be a good team. They want to run the ball. Todd Bowles wants to play good defense and run the ball and protect whether it's Baker or Kyle Trask. We think it's going to be Baker. I don't think it's going to be an explosive offense. I think they're going to be one of the lower teams in pace of play this season. I don't mind investing in the Bucs offense, but Godwin, Evans, Rachaad White. To me, that's sort of
right.
That. And then I'm a Vegas dealer. Yeah. This is me. I'm out. I'm out on Chase Edmonds. I don't think anyone else is in, but whatever.
No. I'm more intrigued by UDFA Sean Tucker from Syracuse.
Thank you.
Who, before he got hurt last year, was probably going in the first 3 rounds.
I was going to say he was going to be a third rounder.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, I'm a Syracuse guy. Go Orange, class of 92, go Cuse. I'm old. But whatever. Like, Sean, I've watched a lot of Syracuse football.
He's good.
Sean Tucker's good.
He's going to be better than Chase Edmonds at some point.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I love that take, too. Yes. Yeah, give me some Sean Tucker over Chase Edmonds. Like, I'd take Chase Edmonds over you as a running back, but
that's fair.
That's about it.
I would too.
And me. I would take Chase Edmonds over me as a running back. Yes, exactly. For the record, you can use promo code CHASE for 7% off.
Chase 7.
Yeah, Chase 7 at NBCSports.com/draft guide. Connor 5 if you only want 5% off. If you want 7% off, you can use Chase 7 or ultimately Barry 20 if you want 20% off. Again, it just depends on how much you want to pay.
We do have people that track this, so throw me a Connor 5 every once in a while,
yeah,
just so I could sell a couple magazines. That
magazine
I actually wrote for too.
Yeah.
Dolphins coach Mike McDaniel said running back Achane is dealing with a leg injury where he is day to day. Obviously, a crowded Dolphins backfield here. You have Raheem Mostert, who, if you've heard him speak, he sounds very excited for another big year.
Yeah.
Jeff Wilson is there. They're still connected very loosely to Dalvin Cook, and of course they used a pretty high pick on Achane, an explosive speed threat that I know you were a fan of in college as well, Barry, but dealing with a minor injury here.
Yeah, until I know that it's more anything than that, I'm not worried about it. But again, over the last 3 years, Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson Jr. have combined to miss 38 games. 38 games. Achane is one of my favorite players coming out of college. I've watched a lot of Achane. He's a tough kid. I know everyone talks about him as a speed guy, but again, you watch him in the SEC. He goes between the tackles. He is tough to bring down. I believe he can ultimately be a workhorse. Again, but I think he profiles better than some people who think of him as just a speed guy. I think he is more than that. I think he plays bigger than his size, kind of thing.
You. Yeah.
And Yeah, I mean, he's my favorite of the Dolphins running backs. I think they'll all have value at some point this year, and I think you'll see McDaniel mix and match and play the matchups. But he's my running back 40. His ADP is running back 48, so I'm significantly higher than him than the consensus ranks. And yeah, give me some Devon Achane. I'll say this: at some point I have to get off my butt and write love hate, my preseason love hate. When it comes out, Devon Achane will be in the others receiving votes section of my love hate.
Best part is you can write it sitting down. You actually don't have to get up.
Yeah, it's true. I probably will. I probably will write it sitting down.
Over in Tennessee, head coach Mike Vrabel said tight end Chig Okonkwo's blocking has to improve. If there's anything you need to know about Mike Vrabel and tight ends, this is something he deeply cares about. I have heard about FaceTime, Zooms, and meetings during the pre-draft process. He will rip into tight ends about blocking. Chig, a bit of a late fantasy darling last season because of his athleticism. Is this something that kind of scares you, where you think he could eat into his reps, or just coach speak?
I think it's sending a message to my guy Chig Okonkwo. But I will say that I'm much more concerned about DeAndre Hopkins than I am about his lack of blocking. That's Vrabel sending a message, and Chig will get there, and he'll work on that. He'll be fine. He'll get there. I mean, he played a lot as a rookie last year. But I will say I'm more concerned about DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, so now it's just we know it's still going to be a run-first offense, right? It's still going to revolve around Derrick Henry. But with Treylon Burks and DeAndre Hopkins, at best, and obviously you've got Derrick Henry, so at best, Chig Okonkwo is the fourth offensive option on that team. And so when they signed Hopkins, and I love Chig Okonkwo, but when they signed DeAndre Hopkins, I moved him down to tight end 16. He's actually going as tight end 13, so I'm weirdly lower on consensus. I'm concerned about target share. Again, he played last year. He was somebody that didn't play on. He played on a decent amount of snaps as a rookie, but still, less than 40% of offensive snaps last year. And it's worth noting that in the past 5 seasons, a third Tennessee pass catcher has seen over 60 targets only once. Once in the past 5 seasons. Again, if we assume Hopkins is going to get his and Burks is going to get his, he's a tight end 2 he's a tight end 2 that you need a touchdown when you start him.
In an offense that a little shaky right now. Yes, it's exciting they got Hopkins, but
I think I'm okay on the offense, but I think it's going to be, I think they're going to be middle of the pack toward they're going to be somewhere. They may play at a higher pace of play now that they've got Hopkins and they're going to open up a little bit more, but they generally speaking are one of the slower paced teams in the NFL because they're so grinded out with Derrick Henry. And so you've got, a couple less possessions per game. I think the offense is fine. I'm just worried about the fantasy production from that offense.
The show is back, and so is the Rotoworld Fantasy Football Draft Guide. Stay connected throughout training camps with updated player rankings, team profiles, and projections that will help you win your fantasy league. Go to NBCSports.com/draft guide and use promo code Barry20 or Connor5 for 20% off at checkout. In the spirit of this being the Fantasy Football Happy Hour, we have a new segment, a guest bartender segment, where we welcome in someone to help us pour some drinks, talk some fantasy football. And our guest this week is Terence Morley, part of the NBC family, NBC's VP of Talent Development. Let's welcome in Terence.
Thank you so much, Connor, and thanks both of you for having me today. Serving up some drinks and some questions.
Tell me about your leagues. So you're in a couple leagues, right?
I'm in a couple leagues. My oldest league, my college league, University Scranton, goes all the way back to 2005. It's the first time we're doing keepers.
Okay.
So last year we said we're going keeper, want to keep it interesting. 12-team PPR, no kicker, no defense. We don't need those.
Right.
So you can keep 2. And here are my 5 choices right now. Would love your thoughts on who potentially to keep in some of those.
Okay, before you get there, then, if you would love my thoughts here, why don't you just do that? You can use promo code Barry20. Just hold that up. There you go.
There we go.
Promo code Barry20 if you want 20% off of the NBC Sports Draft Guide. Or NBCSports.com/draft guide, you can use the promo code Connor5 for 5% off. You get Barry20. If you use the promo code Barry20, you get 20% off. If you use the promo code Connor5, you get 5% off. So either way, at NBCSports.com/draft guide. Go ahead. All right.
So we have Travis Etienne, would cost a second.
Mm-hmm.
DJ Moore would cost a third. Christian Kirk would cost a fifth. Antonio Gibson, a 7th. And then finally, Ken Walker and 8th.
Okay. So I really think it's between the three. I think it's Ken Walker, Antonio Gibson, and Christian Kirk. Those are my three guys. Let's start with the obvious one. I think it's Ken Walker in the 8th, which is really a 10th round pick for you in essence. For me, Ken Walker is a guy that once he became the starter last year, Ken Walker was a top 10 fantasy running back. He was top 5 in the NFL in rushing yards. From the point that he took over for Rashad Penny, on a points per game basis, he was a top 10 fantasy running back. He averaged over 17 fantasy points per game in all of his games as a starter, top 5 in rushing yards in the NFL. I know they have Zach Charbonnet as well, but I actually think he's going to, assuming health for both guys, first off, I think the offense will be a lot better with the addition of JSN, second year under Geno Smith. I also think that Pete Carroll has usually been a one running back guy. So I think 65-70% of the work for Kenneth Walker, assuming health for both guys. He's a 8th round, it cost you an 8th round pick, really a 10th round pick, so Walker is there. You get to Antonio Gibson. Love me Antonio Gibson this year. I think Eric Bieniemy is going to use him quite a bit in the passing game. But on Yahoo's going as running back 39. He's going as a 9th rounder. So in essence, you're getting him for cost. So why waste a keeper on him? Because you could get him there. You could get him there. So I think your answer is Christian Kirk for the second one, right? I am at wide receiver 24, 50th overall, which is like a 6th round pick. So you're able to keep him for, in essence, a 7th round pick because a 5, right? Add the 2 rounds. So for me, Kirk, who last year, 23% target share, top 5 among wide receivers in red zone targets. Yes, they added Calvin Ridley. So probably less targets, but a little bit more efficient. I think the Jaguars actually have a great year offensively. Second year for Lawrence in Peterson's system. I'm in on the Jaguars offense this year. So for me, that's your answer, Walker and Kirk.
Walker and Kirk. So my work league,
Yes,
we
sir.
go full NBC. We use the British Open to determine draft order.
That is okay.
We pick names randomly. I got Rory this year.
All right.
Despite, he came off the Scottish Open one. He finished second.
Okay.
So I have the number 2 pick. Again,
Okay.
same settings, PPR, no kicker, no defense. It's easy to read the rankings, the first round, obviously, but how do you, your advice for really crushing the draft from the 2 spot?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm a big believer in play the hand you're dealt, let the draft come to you. I don't like going into a draft saying, well, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this. So you're probably a better judge, having been with these guys for a long time and knowing them, how they draft. I mean, look, I have Jefferson at 1, McCaffrey at 2. I have Chase at 3. I think any of those guys, one of them will be available to you at 2. If you go by my ranks, if Jefferson goes 1, then I think you take McCaffrey. But if you're like, I'm a little bit nervous about the splits when Mitchell has been healthy or the injury history and you want to go Ja'Marr Chase, you're not losing your league because you have Ja'Marr Chase. To me, I think what I would probably do is come out of the first 3 rounds with 1 running back and 2 wide receivers or reverse. And then a 4-5 turn, you could get Lamar, like a Lamar Jackson or a Joe Burrow there, plus then best available. And if you wanted to, again, like I'm high on Hawkinson, so Hawkinson in the 5th is kind of interesting. And then you're like, you've got 2 wide receivers, a running back, you've got your quarterback and tight end, and then you can just pound running back and wide receiver the rest of the way.
A huge thank you to our guest bartender for today, Terence Morley. And a reminder, the Premier League is back Saturday on NBC and streaming on Peacock. Head to Northwest England, where the surprise club of last season, Newcastle, looks to continue their great form take on Aston Villa, 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time on NBC and Peacock. All right, Barry, we continue going through your positional rankings. If you missed it last Friday, we went through 1 through 10. So a reminder here, here's Barry's top 10 overall for the 2023 fantasy season, headlined by Justin Jefferson. Today, we're going to go all the way to 30. So we'll start with 11 through 20, which is led by Devontae Adams, CeeDee Lamb, Saquon Barkley, A.J. Brown, and Nick Chubb to round out that top 15. And then Tony Pollard at 16 here, Barry, as we get a little run on some interesting running backs. Huge expectations for Tony Pollard this year with Ezekiel Elliott currently out of the picture.
Yeah, I'm at 16. His ADP is 17.1, so I'm slightly higher than him on consensus. Remember, he's also our cover boy here on the Rotoworld Fantasy Football Draft Guide. Look, again, if the Cowboys do bring Ezekiel Elliott back, that would be a thing. But at the moment, the expectation is it's him and like Malik Davis and Deuce Vaughn.
Yeah.
That backfield is all for him. So we expect a ton of touches for Tony Pollard. In his career, he's had 13 games where he's had 15 or more touches. And in those games, He averages 19.6 fantasy points per game. That would have been the third best running back in fantasy last year. He averaged over 5 yards per carry, 9 yards per reception. Him and Travis Etienne, that's the entire list of running backs that average at least 5 yards per carry and at least 9 receptions per yards per reception, right? And I think here's a shocking stat, because he was so effective in space, and because when you watch Cowboys games, you watch him next to Ezekiel Elliott, who's just like this, massive mountain of a guy. But the fact of the matter is that last year, Tony Pollard led all running backs in yards after contact. I think you'd win some bar bets with that, right? We're in a bar. Like, name the running back that led running backs in yards after contact per rush last year.
You think Nick Chubb?
You'd think Nick Chubb, yeah. Derrick Henry, right? Nope. Tony Pollard with 3.82 yards per after contact per rush. He had the highest average. So this is a guy that can go between the tackles. We expect this offense to be pretty good, to be efficient. Dak doesn't really run as much anymore. Mike McCarthy has said he wants to run more. Now, it's also Mike McCarthy. If there's one negative to Pollard, it is Mike McCarthy. This is a guy that, when Aaron Jones was blowing up, would still insist on, the plotting A.J. Dillon or other, or Jamal Williams, just would never, I literally started Free Aaron Jones because of Mike McCarthy. That hashtag Free Aaron Jones. So I never put anything past Mike McCarthy. Could he all of a sudden give 8 to 12 touches a game to Malik Davis, and you're like, what are we doing here? Or Deuce Vaughn? But yeah, crazy talented player on a good offense, solid offensive line, should get a lot of work. He's on the cover for a reason.
So Pollard comes in at 16. Right after him at 17 is Derrick Henry. And the conversation every year here, Barry, is when are the wheels going to fall off the bus for Derrick Henry? The Titans prefer to keep running him into the ground. I don't think he's prime Derrick Henry anymore, but he's certainly still effective where you would use a top 20 pick on him.
I have him at 17. His ADP is actually 14.6, so I'm lower on consensus than him. But it's worth noting, by the way, my ranks are built for PPR. We take our ADP from Yahoo, which is half-point PPR, so that's probably the discrepancy here. 5 straight seasons with double-digit rushing touchdowns for Derrick Henry. He just seems to defy logic. I know we keep waiting for the wheels to fall off, but then last year he came back from a devastating injury and was Derrick Henry again. And I do think that this year, with the addition of DeAndre Hopkins and the emergence of Treylon Burks, and even, by the way, seeing the late-season success of my guy Chig Okonkwo, the fact of the matter is that Derrick Henry should still see less 8-man fronts than he has. He probably has led the league in 8-man fronts, him or Nick Chubb, over the last couple of years, right? And so I think it will be, maybe he won't get nearly the volume, maybe he won't even be as efficient, but I think he will find easier running lanes, and they're still going to run when they get in close. He's still going to get all the money touches. So again, I think even with slightly less volume, I think more efficient runs, and I think it'll be a better offense because of Hopkins there, that they'll be in scoring position more often. I think he's a top 20 player overall. I'm as one of my top running backs again. He comes in at 17 overall for me.
And they still haven't added anyone to that backfield where you're always wondering, when are they going to start lightening the workload? Tyjae Spears isn't going to do that from Derrick Henry.
No. He's a nice player.
Sure.
He's definitely a good insurance running back to draft if you draft Derrick Henry. But no,
it's
you're
Derrick
not
Henry's
like
show.
He ain't taking any meaningful touches from Derrick Henry if Derrick Henry's healthy.
After Derrick Henry at 18 is Garrett Wilson, obviously the reigning offensive rookie of the year. He was able to do that catching passes from Zach Wilson, Joe Flacco, Mike White, even Chris Streveler once upon a time. Now Aaron Rodgers is in town, Barry, and the expectations for Garrett Wilson are obviously through the roof with that connection.
Rightfully so. Aaron Rodgers already comparing to Devontae Adams. Again, this is a stat that I gave on Football Night in America. But last year with Mike White and Joe Flacco under center, he averaged 17.1 fantasy points per game. Now with Zach Wilson, it was like single digits, so I had to throw out Zach Wilson. I had to make it, sound better for national TV. But the fact of the matter is with competent quarterback play, the guy was a superstar. And now he gets Aaron Rodgers. Rodgers has already compared him, again, like I said, to Devontae Adams. Last year, he was top 10 in red zone targets. Garrett Wilson was. Top 10 in red zone targets, top 8 in end zone targets. And then you think about how often Aaron Rodgers liked to look for Devontae Adams when they got in close. Aaron Rodgers wants good numbers. I think he wants to, for everyone that's been saying he's done, for people that, question his commitment to Green Bay, for people that are questioning Nathaniel Hackett, I think he wants to look up at the end of the year and have really good numbers. So I wouldn't be surprised that more often than not, like they get to the 5-yard line and it's, it's Breece Hall up the middle and he checks out of that and it's a quick little slant to Garrett Wilson and I'm going to just take a quick little gimme touchdown. So especially when you think about the fact that at the moment, Dalvin Cook is not signed. We don't expect a full workload for Breece Hall. We'll see what happens with Bam Knight or Michael Carter or some of the other guys they have there, but Israel.
Abanikanda.
Thank you. I know how to pronounce his first name.
Yeah, no, we were just doing the Miami Heat alley-oop meme.
Yeah, perfect, yeah. Exactly. Garrett Wilson's going to have a monster year. It's a top 10 wide receiver for me. He's 18 overall. Insanely talented, and now he's got a quarterback.
He's been dealing with a minor ankle injury in camp, but Robert Saleh expects him to return to practice when they have joint practices with the Carolina Panthers leading up to their Saturday preseason game. So no concern on the health front for Garrett Wilson, who is followed on the list at 19 by Jalen Waddle, who is an absolute star wide receiver, maybe the best number 2, him or T. Higgins, in the entire league. It's just that he plays in an offense with Tyreek Hill, right. That people forget how insanely productive Waddle has been.
He led all wide receivers in yards per target last year, 18.1 yards per reception. That also led the NFL. He had 8 different games with 6 or more targets, 22.7 fantasy points per game. And to your point, it was Mike McDaniel's first year in the system, and they're also incorporating Tyreek Hill. They had inconsistent quarterback play because of the injuries to Tua Tagovailoa and then Teddy Bridgewater. I mean, they literally had to start a playoff game with a third-string undrafted rookie quarterback, right?
Yeah.
By the way, and Skylar Thompson balled out.
Didn't do bad.
No,
I'll say it.
No, absolutely.
Gave the Bills at least a bit of a scare at a moment there.
If they could have gotten the plays in on time,
yes.
It might have been a different story. Again, off of the injury, he was banged up coming out of college, right? So there's concerns there.
Yep.
Jalen Waddle's a special player. Where did you have him coming out of the draft?
Only behind Ja'Marr Chase, which
right.
One of the good takes of things. Special because of the speed and how refined the speed is. He's not a guy we need to throw him a screen for him to be effective. He's a great route runner. He can win deep. Mike McDaniel knows how to perfectly use speed in his scheme, and that's why Waddle was so impactful. And I think when you look at Tyreek, who as he gets older maybe deals with a couple more injuries here and there, it's a situation where Waddle's effectiveness or impact only goes up from there.
Yeah.
He's just a phenomenal player.
He's a phenomenal player. It's going to be a wide-open offense. We're hoping for help from Tua, but the fact of the matter is, as we saw, these guys can all produce regardless of who's under center because of their talent and speed and because of the play calling of Mike McDaniel. So his ADP is 25. I'm at 19, so I'm significantly higher on him than consensus. I'm in on the Miami Dolphins this year. I'm in on that offense, and I'm certainly in on Jalen Waddle.
To round out the top 20 is Jonathan Taylor there. Let me ask you this, Barry. At what point does Taylor start to take an impact the wrong way in the rankings? So what is not the date, that's not fair, but what is the timeline where you look at it and go, can I still take Jonathan Taylor in the top 20?
Yeah, every day that goes by and there's no resolution to this makes you a little bit more nervous, right? And I sort of get, he's already lower than he would be if he were in camp and healthy and everything was fine. So there's absolutely concern. Because here's the thing. I no longer write the Draft Day Manifesto. But when I did, one of the things that I will tell you is that we studied this back when I was at ESPN. We looked at all the leagues and all the data. Something like 33% of your starting lineup fantasy production comes from your first 2 picks. You have to nail your first 2 picks. Otherwise, if you don't nail your first 2 picks, then you've really got to find the late round guys that just pop in a big way, right? You got to find the Josh Jacobses of the world,
sure,
that pop in a big way, or Cooper Kupp from 2 years ago. You got to find those guys because
tough way to live.
No, and there's guys out there. Dameon Pierce, same thing, right? Last year he popped in a way. Ramondre Stevenson, one of my big guys in the preseason, popped in a way. So you have to do it, but it just gives you more work. 33% of your fantasy production in general come from your first 2 picks. You've got to nail your first 2 picks. So yes, you get concerned when you're sitting there, and am I really drafting Jonathan Taylor? Who knows? Does he hold out? Does the Colts it just feels like an ugly situation. I have him where I have him right now. I'm hoping for the best. It's still early in the process, but yes, the longer it goes on, that Jonathan Taylor is not in Colts camp, on the practice field, smiling and happy, the more concerned you get and the lower he drops.
Let's jump into 21 through 30. 21, this kicks off here with Josh Jacobs, who we've talked a lot about on our last couple of shows. 22, Jalen Hurts leads the quarterbacks here, Barry. I'm assuming, yeah, and you have them stacked. It goes Hurts, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, but Hurts last year's ride or die. Is he the greatest ride or die of all time? People are wondering. But also the fact that the rushing really, really helps him in this category too.
I think it's the greatest ride or die of all time for this reason and this reason only. Like, because I've had some massive hits. Kareem Hunt's rookie year was a massive hit. Josh Jacobs' rookie year was a massive hit. Austin Eckler. When he was going late second round, and everyone was just like, well, Austin Eckler's just a pass catcher. He's a glorified third down back. He's not going to score touchdowns. And I'm like, guys, they're going to use it's Lombardi. They're going to use him the way they use Alvin Kamara. Like, he can score touchdowns. Like, and he ended up finishing as, I think, the number one running back or the second best running back in fantasy that year. So that was a massive win as well, just because the narrative was so strong that he wouldn't score touchdowns. And then the year he was my ride or die, he scored 18 touchdowns. But I'm going to say Jalen Hurts is my greatest one, and because for two reasons. Number one is that the bar to clear was so high. Again, like, it wasn't like, it's not that he was an unknown quantity. That's the other thing is I get people like, oh, everyone knew who he was. Yeah, the idea of ride or die isn't like, hey, here's this obscure guy.
Right. It's not a sleeper.
It's not a sleeper. This is a player who is known, that I believe in so strongly that I'm planting this huge flag. This is the guy that I will not waver from, that I am riding or dying with him, and I think he takes a big step up. I have him higher than consensus. I believe in this guy above all others. So that's what it is. It's planting my flag on somebody in a big, massive way. So for Jalen Hurts, like, he had to beat Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert, all these guys that were and Kyler Murray, all these guys that were being drafted ahead of him. He had to jump. He was going as quarterback 8. So number one, there was just from a football standpoint, just a massive gap that he had to make up. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to, if you're to be my ride or die and be successful, it doesn't mean you have to finish as number one. But what I said on air was, as I said, so many questions out of Philadelphia were, can this guy be a franchise quarterback? Eagles fans were pissed that the Eagles didn't draft a quarterback when they had a sixth round, the sixth overall pick, and then they traded back with Miami, and they had a top 12 pick overall. But they were pissed that they didn't take at least a quarterback. And Howie Roseman was like, no, we're going with Jalen Hurts, and people were like, his accuracy, blah blah blah, he's just a runner, that kind of stuff. And I went on national TV and I said, guys, I believe he is a franchise quarterback. I believe he can make a third-year Josh Allen-like leap, like the way that Josh Allen made in the third year. I think number one quarterback in fantasy is well within the range of outcomes here for Jalen Hurts, and I gave a bunch of reasons why. And two things happened. Number one is that he wound up as the number one quarterback in fantasy on a points per game basis. That worked out. And then secondly, by the way, he was also he became a franchise quarterback. He came within, he led them to a Super Bowl. Came very close to winning that Super Bowl. He played awesome in the Super Bowl. The fumble was bad, but other than that, he had a phenomenal. He's not the reason they lost that Super Bowl. He had a phenomenal Super Bowl. He became a franchise quarterback. He became, at least for a minute there, the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. It wasn't just fantasy. He became the face of a franchise, one of the faces of the league, and so that just massively worked out. And then I'll just also talk personally. It's the very first thing I ever did for NBC Sports. I've been at ESPN for 15 years, and now I'm coming, for the first time in my life, I'm not only at a new company, but I'm also part of NFL coverage, right? At ESPN, it was always the fantasy guy was over here. NFL coverage, we're doing Monday Night Countdown, NFL Live, and blah, blah, blah. And then I was over here in my little fantasy world, doing my fantasy shows and stuff like that on ESPN. It was separation of church and state. But at NBC, and it was one of the big reasons I came to NBC, is NBC's like, no, we want you to be part of our NFL coverage. How we cover the league is going to include fantasy and sports betting. And so this is my first time, right? And so I'm out there, and literally the Hall of Fame game was my first day that I'd ever met a lot of these people. It's the first day I've ever met Hall of Fame coach Tony Dungy. It's the first time I've met Maria Taylor. It's the first time I've met, should be in the Hall of Fame, Rodney Harrison, right? I mean, I wasn't on air with him, but like I met Chris Collinsworth there, like back at the hotel.
Right.
And so like it's big for me. And I'd met Jason Garrett once before, but now I'm on a stage with him, on TV with Jason Garrett, right? And so all these like great football minds, and I'm the fantasy guy coming in, and the very first thing I say, and Chris Sims, who knows quarterbacks backwards and forwards, I'm doing the segment with Chris Sims, right? Son of Phil, fantasy, football royalty, NFL royalty, and I'm doing the segment with Sims, and Sims has been public about this, that he didn't, from the tape work that he does, and Chris, Chris puts in the work. I got to tell everyone. Chris absolutely puts in the work. And so Chris is telling me, he's like, I'm hearing from guys, they don't like how he goes through his progressions. I don't know that I see it there. And I'm going on national TV. First thing I do, first day, I'm saying, guys,
this is the guy.
This is the guy. I think he can be Josh Allen this year. And I was like, okay, dude. So the fact that it worked out was just massive for me personally, internally. I think it helped me a lot internally here at NBC Sports, and with my colleagues who, have forgotten more about football than I'll ever know. And so, I mean, that's a long rant, but yeah, Jalen Hurts will always, always, always have a very special place in my heart.
Jalen Hurts.
If I could have made him my ride or die again this year, I would have.
You know what? In your heart, he's still always a ride or die.
Well, yes.
But I'm still St. Brown season.
But by the way, Jalen Hurts is my number one quarterback this year.
Sure.
Right?
Over.
And we're going to go
As
right
we
here
transition
lead us to it, right?
over Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. And we'll start right there with Josh Allen, who we heard this last summer. The Bills would like him to maybe run a little less often. Yes,
Right.
they took James Cook that offseason with the second-round pick. Yes, they've added a guy like Damian Harris. They do have depth at the running back position. What makes Allen so valuable, obviously, he's a great thrower, but the running threat that he has been in fantasy, is it sustainable, you think, this year? You don't have that fear of it dropping off a little bit?
What was the Cam Newton quote? You can't tell the lion not to roar.
That's
is that
right.
what it was?
I think it's it, yeah.
That's what it is with Josh Allen. They can say all they want.
It's in his blood.
When Josh Allen is a baller, Josh Allen is just a plain, simple baller. And when he's out there and he sees an opening and he's going to try to make a play, he's going to make a play. He's not going to be like, oh, you know what? I see an opening
told me
there.
not to run
I
anymore.
see an opening in the A gap, but they've told me not to run it. You know what I mean? He's just going to now, do they maybe call less design plays? I think so. Do I think they try to get him some help, right? So they added Dalton Kincaid out of the draft, I think will be helpful. I think, Gabe Davis, a healthy Gabe Davis, again, we talked about this, he had a high ankle sprain that wasn't reported. We knew there was something about his foot. We knew it was but it wasn't reported as a high ankle sprain. And that was something that came out this offseason at the Combine, where both Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane both said, because I asked both of them directly about Gabe Davis. They both said, well, he was dealing with a high ankle sprain.
Everyone was
whoa. A high ankle sprain? Because that's different than what you guys said during the season. And that, I think, significantly changes how you perceive his year last year. Obviously, they have Stephon Diggs. You mentioned James Cook. They have a couple of guys in Damian Harris and Latavius Murray who have proven to be pretty effective at the goal line. So, yeah, maybe. Could he lose 2 rushing touchdowns this year? Yeah, possibly. Slightly less yardage, but he's number 2. I think he's a baller. He's had at least 6 rushing touchdowns in every single year he's played in the NFL. I see no reason why that won't continue. And I think the important thing is, if we can flash my rankings back up there for people that are watching the show. I know people are hearing it on air, but if you're just listening to this, I have Jalen Hurts at 22 overall, Josh Allen at 23 overall, Patrick Mahomes at 24 overall. You see it there on your screen, all in a row. And the way I do my rankings, Connor, is that's my way of saying, look, I have to put somebody in order. So, yes, all things considered, if I'm sitting there and I want a quarterback, I have Hurts, then Allen, then Mahomes. But by putting them all next to each other, it's my way of saying, I think it's razor thin.
They're in a tier.
They're in a tier. And, if you get to that point and you're like, I kind of like Mahomes a little bit better, you ain't losing because you have Patrick Mahomes on your team. He's going to be awesome this year, as is Josh Allen, as is Jalen Hurts. So that's why I have them all there. With Mahomes, he runs less, obviously, than Hurts or Allen. Again, new wide receivers. They're leaning a lot on Kadarius Toney. Can he stay healthy? Sky Moore's a young player. MVS is sort of inconsistent. Yes, they have Kelsey, but wrong. I mean, so just, again, at this level, you have to nitpick. You have to really nitpick. And so I just feel there's less picks to nit with Jalen Hurts than there are with Allen or Mahomes. But again, they're all right there. They're all superstars. They're my first 3 quarterbacks up the board, they're all going to have monster years.
That brings us to 25, which is Mark Andrews. All offseason, Barry, we have talked about the hiring of Todd Monken to orchestrate this offense, going from Greg Roman's run-heavy design to Todd Monken's very famous for saying, I like big plays, I like explosive plays a few years ago. Now Mark Andrews into the fold with that, a happy and paid Lamar Jackson. It feels like as long as he's healthy, Mark Andrews can be the force at the tight end position that he's been.
And I think the important thing is that I think people are disappointed by Mark Andrews last year, but I think, I don't think they appreciate how much Tyler Huntley affected Mark Andrews last year and that entire offense where they had to scale it back and they had to go even more run heavy. In the 10 games that Mark Andrews played last year with Lamar Jackson, a 28% target share, over 60 receiving yards a game, he averaged 14.5 fantasy points per game. Compare that with Huntley, where he averaged just 9.1 fantasy points per game. We expect this offense to explode under Monken. We expect there to be in scoring position quite often. Mark Andrews, friend of the podcast, Mark Andrews, by the way, we interviewed him last year. He's still going to be their best red zone threat. And now the addition of Odell Beckham Jr., the drafting of Zay Flowers, having Rashad Bateman back, suddenly it's pick your poison. I think this passing offense still goes through Mark Andrews. I think he's still a big red zone and end zone target. It's worth noting that he was tied for the second most end zone targets among all tight ends. Last year, he was 4th in red zone targets. Again, they getting close. The Ravens look for Mark Andrews, and I think that will continue to be the case. But the fact of the matter is because you've got Beckham, because you've got Zay Flowers, because you've got the Lamar Jackson who's always a threat to tuck it and run it, it's just pick your poison. And so there may be slightly less targets for Andrews, but again, I think they'll be more efficient. I think they'll play at a higher pace of play. I think they'll be in scoring position often. They're going to throw a lot more. I think Mark Andrews is the clear-cut number 2 tight end. And if you sat here and said, Matthew, give me a tight end that finishes if I told you Travis Kelce is not the number 1 tight end in fantasy this year, who is it? Mark Andrews is the guy.
26, an interesting one here in Chris Olave, Saints wide receiver, who had, honestly, on paper, at least a case to be the offensive rookie of the year last year. You're a little higher on Chris Olave here, Barry. Olave's ADP right now, 32.3. You have him 26th overall. Obviously, all the news is that Michael Thomas is healthy. We'll see how long that lasts. But you are very high on Olave and his new quarterback connection now with Derek Carr in the fold.
Week 2 on. Again, they're just sort of they had Andy Dalton there, and the Saints offense last year was a bit of a mess. But from week 2 on, Chris Olave had a 28% target share, which is top 10 among all wide receivers. They looked for him early and often. In games last year, he had 11 games last year where he had 6 or more targets. In those games, he averaged over 15 fantasy points per game. And I think an underrated aspect of Derek Carr being the new quarterback in New Orleans is this. Last 2 seasons, Derek Carr, top 5 in the NFL in both deep ball rate and deep completions. He likes to chuck it deep, which, by the way, that's what Chris Olave does.
It's the name of his game.
Right? Go down and get it.
He's the air yards king.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
I think Olave has a monster year. I think Derek Carr is an above-average NFL quarterback, but I think for Chris Olave, he's a perfect quarterback, especially as we talked about. Alvin Kamara is missing 3 games. We'll see how healthy he is. Yeah, sure, fine. Michael Thomas is healthy now. Okay, we'll see how long that lasts, but whatever. This passing offense is going to go through Chris Olave. I think he's going to get, a 28% target share. I see nothing in what we have this year that makes me think that's going down. If anything, I think that goes up. I think Derek Carr will lock onto Chris Olave the way he locked onto Devontae Adams last year. And so, I had a short list of people that were my fantasy ride or die, and Chris Olave was on that list.
The top 30 rounds out with T. Higgins at 27, Devontae Smith at 28, 29 is Ramondre Stevenson, and 30, Joe Mixon from the Bengals. So there you have it, Barry.
I'll say this. If the Patriots don't sign another running back, and I really think they will, I think it'll be Zeke or Fournette. They've kicked the tires on both those guys. They definitely want another veteran in there from everything I've heard. Once they sign him, I think you could see me flipping Mixon. I love Ramondre Stevenson. But I think you could see me flipping Mixon and Stevenson. But I will say this. If for some reason they don't, if the Patriots go into the season saying we're good with Pierre Strong and J.J. Taylor and, whatever. Oh, Ramondre Stevenson goes way up. He's ranked where he is because I'm assuming there'll be another guy signed, and then we're just waiting to see sort of who it is. But if not, Stevenson, I think, is just a really talented running back. So I think he'll go high up. And I think some people might be surprised to see Devontae Smith that high. But real quickly, go to my 100 Facts column, which is free, NBCSports.com, Rotoworld.com on Company Man. But you'll see there, in my 100 Facts column, the 100 facts you need to know before you draft, I lay out, like, the numbers for A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith after, like, a certain period of time, like I think it was a couple weeks in, and you look at them, the numbers are, like, identical. Like, Devontae Smith had a bad week 1. And then from, like, week 2 on, like, they were more or less the same guy. A.J. Brown has more touchdown equity, obviously, but people are sleeping on Devontae Smith.
Do you think if he looked as physically imposing as A.J. Brown, they'd be viewed exactly the same? That's my theory.
That's the problem.
He's a Slim Reaper.
He doesn't look like.
But when you look at the numbers, like you said, especially after that week 1, not that different. So.
Yeah.
All right, that's a wrap for us. We will be back on Wednesday with more rankings.
More rankings. NJ. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. It's closing time. Jay is taking lonely showers alone, but he'll be back here on Wednesday. Very excited. For Connor Rogers, I'm Matthew Berry. Peace out. Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBC Sports and Rotoworld.com. Just want to thank you so much for watching what you just watched, or at least being too lazy to click out of it after the autoplay just kept it going. So either way, thank you so much for just letting it scroll by your screen. And now I'd like to ask you respectfully, please subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel for the latest NFL news, fantasy headlines from Rotoworld, and betting analysis from NBC Sports Edge.